Welcome to the CDFA Hotline. My name's Kristen Sharon, and I'm very excited to be here with you today. For those of you who are new, on our hotline, we give you the opportunity to ask professionals in the divorce and financial industry questions about the divorce process. We're hoping that this hotline will generate some discussion that you find helpful. And the purpose of our show is to provide general information as it relates to divorce and to showcase how certified divorce financial professionals can help. And while we will be answering questions about divorce and finances, we cannot offer personalized financial or legal advice. The reason for this is because each divorce situation is so specific. There are many factors that impact your particular situation, such as state-specific statutes and guidelines. We're going to answer questions generally, and we hope to steer you towards resources, information, and professionals that can help you, but nothing that you hear on this show should be construed as legal advice, financial advice, or tax advice. And I really can't emphasize this enough. Please do not consider anything you hear today on the show as a reason not to seek professional help that is specific to your individual situation and geographical area, as that can vary wildly. This show is educational, not advisory, and we do, however, hope to provide you with some great information and resources that can put you in the right direction. So my co-host today is I'm really excited to introduce you to Leah Hadley. Leah is the founder and CEO of Wealth Partners and Intentional Divorce Solutions. Leah combines nearly 2 decades of experience in the financial services industry with a deep passion for helping others navigate life's biggest transitions. Having walked through her own divorce and rebuilt her life on her own terms, she's made it her mission to help clients gain clarity, confidence, and control over their money so that they can move forward with purpose and peace of mind. Welcome, Leah.
Thank you so much, Kristen. It's such an honor to be here.
Yeah, all right. So we've got some questions that some people have sent in today that we will try to answer. What are the biggest financial mistakes that people make at the very beginning of their divorce?
Ooh, this is a good one. So I would say, it's really interesting to see how people approach the divorce process. Some people get super, super organized, they're ready to go. Most people, not so much. I would say the sooner that you can collect all your information and get organized, the more it actually saves you a tremendous amount of money throughout the divorce process. And that seems so weird to people that actually has that big an impact. But the fact of the matter is, like, going back and forth with information with professionals, having professionals request information multiple times, it just adds a lot of stress and a lot of cost to the divorce itself. So I would say early on, the more organized you can get, it's going to save you so much stress and so much money throughout the process.
I could not agree with that more. Okay, we got another question. How do I know if I can afford to get divorced?
Hmm. It's interesting. I've actually had people over the years come, sometimes years before they decide to move forward with the divorce process, to come and look at realistically, if I decided to move forward with the termination of marriage, what would my financial situation look like? And I think that is a really practical thing to do if you are in a space and able to take the time to do that well before you decide to move forward. Fact of the matter is, divorce does impact every area of our lives, right? It's going to impact our relationships. It's absolutely going to impact our finances. And so really understanding what that looks like can give you some clarity around, what the right next step is. For some people, when we sit down with them years in advance, maybe they're dealing with debt. The best situation is for them to get that debt paid down. So that way they're both coming out of the marriage in a better cash flow situation, right? If they don't have savings, the fact of the matter is divorce itself costs money, but then all of the changes that people are going through. So if you're planning and preparing, that gives you time to build up that savings, gives you a lot more freedom and flexibility of choice when you're going through the divorce process. So some of those things are really, really critical. But you also got to look at what is the cost of staying in the marriage, right? So sometimes there is this financial cost that we're looking at, and it may absolutely make sense for somebody to take time and prepare and plan, just like you would getting married, right? People take years to plan to get married. But sometimes people are in a situation where the cost of staying is actually much higher than the cost of leaving. Not necessarily from a financial standpoint, but maybe. And so I think you got to look at it from both sides. That's really important.
I love that. And I think having that financial clarity really just takes the stress out of the decision, and allows you to make more mindful choices.
Absolutely.
All right. What financial documents should I gather before I tell my spouse that I want a divorce?
This is one where I think people do put a little too much pressure on themselves, quite frankly. Um, I always tell people you're going to need everything with a dollar sign on it, right? Whether it's tax returns, bank statements, credit card statements, investment account statements, you're going to need to collect everything with a dollar sign on it. However, where I think a lot of people get stuck is they don't necessarily know how to access that information. And that's okay. Like if you are listening to this and you're in a position and you're like, well, I want to collect everything, but I don't feel like I can, that's okay. Once you get started in the process, then there will be ways that, you can request that information potentially through your attorney if necessary, or work with the courts to get that information if necessary. So don't let that stop you. But the more information and the more organized you can be, just like I kind of talked about at the beginning, the better positioned you're going to be for a smoother process. But again, if you're somebody who just doesn't have access to those documents right now, don't get stuck there. You will get access ultimately.
I'm going to steal that. Everything with a dollar sign. That's so funny. Uh, okay. Should I open my own bank account before I tell my spouse that I want a divorce?
Yeah, this is one of those, it depends. I think it's really important for everybody to have their own bank account for a variety of reasons. But if you have been operating in such a way that you have not had your own bank account throughout the marriage, and now you're approaching, maybe asking for a divorce, sometimes opening that account in advance, if it's not really necessary, can cause conflict, right? It can feel like to your spouse that you're doing something behind their back. So if you need to open an account, absolutely 100% do that right away. But if you are in a situation where, you know that you guys can talk things through, can plan together, can talk about when you're opening your own accounts, those kinds of things. I love it when people can collaborate through this process. I always look at divorce more as a puzzle that we're trying to kind of put all the pieces together and figure out how to resolve, rather than like this kind of competition or game or, so the more that you are able to work together, I think the better, but I think you have to be really realistic about your personal situation.
Great. Okay. What does life really look like financially in the first year after divorce?
Well, I'll tell you what, Kristen, for me, it was it was a pretty the clearer you can get on what your lifestyle looks like, what the cost is of your current lifestyle, and what changes that you're going to need to make post-divorce, you'll get some clarity around what those costs might look like. There's a lot of change that happens when people are going through a divorce, right? Whether that is their actual residence, where they're living, how they're living. Sometimes people are making employment changes, so income might be, changing a lot. Your expenses are changing a lot. Give yourself grace that first year and acknowledge that you've been through a lot. There are a lot of decisions that need to be made. But the more intentional you can be with those decisions during that first year, the more that that year is going to be easier and lead to a more secure financial future, right? Where I see people making huge mistakes is just continuing to live that first year like nothing has changed, right? Continuing to spend at a level that maybe they can't afford on an ongoing basis, not being realistic about the changes that have happened in their lives. That's where people really get stuck from a financial standpoint, because then you're taking on debt or you're spending through your assets too quickly. And that's not where you want to be.
Yeah. I think people also um, are afraid to change their children's lifestyle. And sometimes that needs to happen. And you'd be surprised how resilient children can be. But I see people get themselves in a lot of trouble by trying to not change the children's lifestyle in any way, shape, or form. And sometimes that needs to happen.
Well, that's such an important point, right? And like kids learn really important lessons from witnessing those adjustments, right? When we see, hey, there's been a change in our life, whether that's divorce or somebody lost a job or you lost a loved one or whatever, if there's a change, a big change like that in your life, it's going to impact your finances as it should. Right. And I think it's important for kids to understand that when we're going through life, there are going to be times when we have more and there's going to be times when we have less, and that's completely normal. And that they also And when they grow up, when these things happen in their lives, they need to be able to know how to make those changes. So role modeling that is actually incredibly valuable for kids.
Yeah, it can be a great learning opportunity.
Yeah.
Okay, how can I protect my credit during and after divorce? What would you tell me about my credit score?
Yeah, so credit is one of those things that often gets forgotten through the divorce process if you are not working with a financial professional. So this is something that is so, so, so important. And it starts with knowing where you are starting, right? Run your credit report. If you've never run your credit report, you can go to annualcreditreport.com. You can get a free credit report from each of the different reporting agencies and take a look at that report and see what's on it. You may find some surprises. You may not, which is great. But you may find some surprises that need to be addressed, maybe debts that you weren't aware of, maybe there's something out there in collections that you didn't realize. But staying in tune with your credit throughout the process and making really intentional decisions about timing of how you might be making adjustments. So, for example, one of the things that may happen through the divorce process as you guys are negotiating, you may end up deciding to close some joint credit cards, for example. Well, that could potentially have an impact on your credit depending on how that was set up, when it was set up. And you might be at the end of your divorce process planning to refinance your house, right? You might be wanting to get a mortgage and having your credit score as high as possible during that refinancing process to be able to get the most reasonable interest rate available to you is really, really important. So we look at things like the timing of closing credit cards and things like that to make sure that we're not hurting your credit score just as you're preparing for a major refinancing, right? So part of it is just monitoring your credit through the process, but part of it is being really strategic about when you might be refinancing different lines of credit or closing things like that.
Well, and that's how utilizing a certified divorce financial analyst or a financial professional can help you think of those things that you're not necessarily going to think about and maybe aren't necessarily intuitive.
Absolutely. And people don't realize how much that actually costs you in the long term, right? I mean, we're talking about significant difference in the rates that you're financing, and sometimes people are financing large dollar amounts. So in
Mhm.
some cases, we could be talking about tens of thousands of dollars, if not more.
You're right. Well, this segues into the next question. When should someone bring a CDFA into the divorce process, and how is that different from using an attorney?
So we do not provide legal advice at all and really encourage people to lean on a good attorney for legal advice. A lot of times people actually want to prepare some of the ways they're thinking about the finances, preparing themselves for the financial changes well before they're ready to actually start the divorce process itself. So I think engaging a CDFA early on can really help you put those pieces in place of things like how do I think about can I afford to stay in the house or not, right? Like what are you actually going to be requesting in your settlement? You may not know what different situations may cost you, or the difference between keeping more retirement assets versus more equity in the home. Looking at all of those pieces, how that's going to impact you, not just today, but over the next 5, 10, 20 years. I mean, we're making financial decisions that have really long-term implications when people are going through the divorce process. And so the earlier on you can feel really confident in knowing your numbers and knowing what you want out of the process, again, it's just going to make the process that much smoother for you. And so I really encourage people to start working with a CDFA early on. Now, that said, even if you're post-divorce, we still have people who reach out to us years after the divorce because there may be like some additional analysis that needs to be done or whatever. It's never too late to reach out to a CDFA. You're just going to get the most value if you do it as early on as possible.
I agree. And I am a divorce attorney, and I love it when clients come in with the information because it just helps me help them
Right,
and give better advice because I have data to give advice about.
right.
So I think that the earlier the better as well. All right. Our last question is, what's one financial truth about divorce you wish most people understood before they start the process?
Ooh, this is a great question. There's so many. I would say, I think this is a really, really important one. There's a lot of information available online, and there are countless people who would love to give you advice in different groups on social media, based on their personal experience or based on their anger or whatever. And I would just really discourage relying on that because, sometimes people will come to me with a very specific question that they don't understand about something they read online, and it's not relevant for the state that they're in. So a lot of times people don't necessarily have enough information to really look at what they're reading online and apply it to their specific situation. And certainly if you're getting advice from some of these social media groups, rather than like professionals, it may or may not be good advice, quite frankly. And what I see it doing to people is it sends them down a rabbit hole a lot of times that adds a lot of conflict and cost to their case that's just completely unnecessary. I am a big believer that divorce is, a restructuring of how families, interact and how they live, but it's not doesn't have to be complete destruction. It doesn't have to completely destroy your financial life, but you have to make intentional decisions in order for that to be the case. You have to really be present and not just kind of, hearing this person and that person and, all of a sudden you're very confused and overwhelmed, which again, completely normal, but it adds cost and complexity to the process.
Yeah, I completely agree. I've seen so many situations where every single family is different and
Yeah.
every single family is unique, and your divorce is not going to be like your friend's divorce. And so I completely agree with you. I think that oftentimes you're setting yourself up for some disappointment or some failure or just some confusion, like you said, that's unnecessary. It's good to go out and look on the internet and get some basic information so that you have a baseline of understanding of how things work. I definitely encourage that, but I absolutely agree with you that um, a lot of times clients they don't see their situation objectively.
Right.
And so you may read something and think that it applies to you, and in reality it doesn't. And sometimes that's where you need that neutral perspective to come in to say, no, kind of here's the numbers, or this is realistic, or this is what you can look at. And so I think that that's so valuable and so important. Thank you for sharing.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being here with us today. We really appreciate it. And if anyone needs to reach out to Leah, I will put her link down below. And if you guys have any other questions for our next episode of the hotline, please email us. The link will also be down below, and we look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks.